Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in our first Climate Action webinar of 2022. My name is Laura Dolsky, Principal at DLR Group, and I will be your moderator for today's session. AIA California recognizes that the planet is experiencing an urgent climate emergency and that California should continue to elevate its position as a global leader in addressing the grave challenges of advancing climate change and natural resource depletion. To help do this, AIA California has developed an in-depth education climate action webinar series that incorporates the AIA framework for design excellence and includes zero net carbon education. All webinar content and additional resources will be available on the AIA California website shortly after each session. A few quick housekeeping reminders before we get started. Please use the Q&A function to ask any questions for today's presenters. You can also like a question to move it to the top of the queue. Questions that are not answered in the webinar can be made available on our website. Today's session qualifies for one AIA HSW learning unit for those watching live, and the AIA California staff will report these units for you. The session is also being recorded and will be posted on the AIA California website with additional resources and a PDF of the presentation shortly after today's session. Today's program will examine DLR Group's Sonrai IAQ, a new air quality analytics platform that integrates data streams across an array of smart IoT devices. Sonrai IAQ was created as a direct response to the industry's need to organize, contextualize, and democratize building performance data. I would like to quickly introduce today's presenters before getting this program started. Rory Barnwell is a principal at DLR Group, as well as our Smart Buildings practice leader. Based in our Chicago studio with over 20 years of experience, Rory provides integrated design support and expertise in high-performance building design and smart building operations across the firm's core market sectors. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Building Services Engineering from the Dublin Institute of Technology in Ireland, where he was born and raised. Rory's career mission is to elevate the built environment through design and lead the transformation to smart, healthy, high-performing buildings and restore order to the climate for future generations.
All right, well, yeah, again, thanks for having me. And here today to talk about a little application that we put together here at DLR Group called Sonrai IAQ, Intelligent Air Quality. It's the agenda, we're going to have a lot of, I guess, what looks like salesy marketing slides in here, but the intention is not to sell this product right now. Is more kind of to talk through why a design firm went down this path. I'm assuming that the majority of the folks on the call are it's an AIA California call. Obviously, most of the folks are in the design industry. So, why would we do this? And I'd be lying if I didn't say I woke up some mornings asking myself the same question, why we did it. But yeah, let's get into it. We'll talk about the pros and cons and how it was born, what we actually measure, how we gather the data, visualize that data, and ultimately, how do we work it into the design process? Focus on the post-occupancy evaluation and what is it? Basically, hopefully, you guys will get that out of the presentation. So, as Laura said, as questions pop up, throw them into the chat. We'll have time at the end to answer them, but please, yeah, throw them on in there as soon as you think of them. So first, just a little bit about DLR Group, assuming you're not familiar, maybe you are, but we're an integrated design firm, architects and engineers. We're 29 studios across the country, a couple of international offices in Shanghai and Dubai. It's a little out of date, that number. We're a little closer to 1,300 employees right now. California, we've got a large chunk of that employee ownership in California, in San Francisco, Sacramento, LA, Riverside, and San Diego. So let's get into it here. How the app was born. Why did a design firm want to create a piece of software? And I guess first of all, maybe zooming out a little bit and giving a little more context about DLR Group and some of our proudest moments over the last few years that hopefully shine a light on who we are and what we're all about. We're a firm that leads with design. So in 2014, we were very proud to receive a AIA Code Award for the Wayne Aspinall Federal Courthouse in Colorado. This was one of the first, I think it was the first net zero historical building in GSA's portfolio. Project we were very proud of. Then again, in 2018, we also got an AIA Code Award for the Renwick Gallery in DC. This was also an integrated design project where we have brought our architects and engineers to the table, and my colleague Roger Chang did a bang up job on this project here. So it's 2014, 2018, hopefully 2022, we'll continue to run here. So fingers crossed. So, looking through that, again, I'll talk a little bit about our visioning process. Every 5 years, DLR Group is an employee-owned firm. So every 5 years, we take an opportunity to zoom out and poll all, 1,300 employee owners on where we're going, what are the threats to our threats, opportunities, state of the industry, where we want to see ourselves in 5 years' time, and ultimately, what are the North Stars that we're going to lay out our business planning for the next 5 years. As we were looking through using the Code Award, the Code Top 10 measures as a roadmap, a place where we definitely saw an opportunity to improve, and really where it's the genesis for the idea of the concept of Sonrai is in the discovery phase, essentially what happens after occupancy. How do we measure the success of a building in the long term? So, again, how do we get here? Just looking back, maybe kind of a summary of the last 6 to 8 years at DLR Group, and specifically the group I lead, the energy focused, commissioning is our bread and butter, monitoring based commissioning. The evolution of that practice from as an industry, we've evolved from a manual process using clipboards, moving towards online checklists. Eventually, the data analytics platforms like a SkySpark's what we use, but there's many other best-in-class fault detection diagnostic platforms out there, like a Coppertree Analytics or a Clockworks or a Switch Automation or Iconics. So the point is there's that those platforms have become a lot more accessible and affordable to deploy, and so our commissioning process got a lot more sophisticated over the last 6-8 years. Because now we've got a lot better at integrating to building systems, pulling large data sources together. Our analytics skill sets, our core skill sets for analytics improve. And that's really, if there's a secret sauce behind it here, it's the data analytics factor. How are we gathering that data? Organizing, how we organize and contextualize that data is the key part here. And we lean very heavily on Project Haystack. That's an ontology for semantic data tagging, similar to a brick schema. Google have their own smart building ontology as well. Essentially, they're all kind of trying to do the same thing, applying standard metadata over different types of data. The biggest challenge when we're trying to integrate to different buildings is trying to matching up different lighting control systems to building automation systems, different vintages, different manufacturers, etc. So being able to apply a common data standard over that to organize the data and set up a foundation where you can build on and do the cooler stuff like we're about to go into here. That's really very important. And then as the third part of that would be our focus on indoor environmental quality. So over the years, we were always, as our brand promise is to elevate the design experience through design. And so by default, at a fully integrated design firm, we look at things in a very holistic fashion. So being a net zero building on its own is not it's not the be all and end all, right? It needs to, if it's a low energy user, doesn't use much energy, but it's a horrible place to be, and the acoustics aren't great, or the lighting isn't great, or clearly we're going to focus on air quality and occupant comfort here in this conversation. But you get the point. We need to look at it holistically, and so we've been very cognizant in evolving that viewpoint as we've been evolving the energy and the analytics aspect. And so ultimately trying to create a process where we're evolving design process and using evidence-based performance metrics to inform a smarter design process, essentially. So fast forward to today, and where Sonrai is at, and this is probably, I'll fill in the bits in the middle of how we got here, but today, Sonrai IAQ hosts the largest database of air quality, third-party verified air quality data in the world, including the most recent air certified square footage in North America. A large part of that is because we've been doing it for a long time. We did the first ever reset air project at the merchandise market in North America in 2016. And just this past year, the largest commercial office building in the world, which is the twin tower development you see in the center of the picture here, at the head of Millennium Park in Chicago. That's 12 Pru, 2.8 million square foot facility. And so yeah, that's the kind of the stats where we're at right now. So I feel like, gotten it to a best-in-class application for what it's intended to do. But we need to continually evolve, continually iterate. Can't stand still, or it's just another app at the end of the day. So let's dive into what is measured. So this is everything else in between getting to that point. So well, this is a kind of an interesting photo because the first two reset air projects in North America are in this photo. Across anyone familiar with the NeoCon conference knows the Merchandise Mart. This is looking out of our window in Chicago. This is actually the same viewpoint I'm looking out right now, funnily enough. But and then our own Chicago office was the second reset certified air project. But looking at the metrics, I think CO2, we'll start with that one. That's probably the mainstream metric that we would have used as an industry. We've always, been tracking CO2 levels as a metric for energy reduction, for demand control ventilation, for example. We breathe out CO2. CO2 is a natural human bioeffluent. So by default, it's a good proxy for how well or how poorly ventilated a space might be. If we've got 6 people in a small conference room for an extended period of time and they're all breathing out, CO2 levels are going to go up, and we're going to experience that kind of stuffiness factor. Everyone's been in that class or lecture where you kind of nod it off. Hopefully you guys are not doing it right now with my presentation, but that's a good proxy for we need more ventilation. We need to reduce this stuffiness. And so we've evolved to where we are today, where we want to measure that. We want our systems to dynamically respond to alleviate these high CO2 situations. TVOCs, again from the materials aspect, that's been kind of on our radar for a long time with lead projects and whatnot. What's the off-gassing of carpets, paints, glues, adhesives, etc. So we've made a lot of leaps and bounds in our industry in terms of red listing the bad materials and focusing on the good materials that don't off-gas. And so, but also there's an element of off-gassing in all materials. And so with new construction or renovation, tenant improvement of spaces, there's always going to be an element of flushing out those TVOCs. And even looking at the data in an office like I'm sitting in right now, you can still see things drift up overnight when the HVAC systems are off, and then you turn them on and it comes back down again. So, and in the context of where we're at today with the pandemic, maybe things like green cleaning have gone out the well. Maybe we're not washing our groceries anymore like we were at the start of the pandemic, but and so there was a big focus on deep cleaning and using harsher chemicals, and that was definitely impacting the TVOCs as well. PM 2.5 would have been a mainstream metric in places like Asia and countries that had poor outdoor air quality due to smog or emissions from power plants, etc. We've all seen the prior to the pandemic, wearing masks on the streets of Shanghai was not an unusual thing because the outdoor air quality was so bad. Unfortunately, it's a mainstream metric for folks on the West Coast now with the wildfires and stuff like that. But we see PM 2.5 as an issue. It's basically smaller particulate matter that when you breathe it in, that your lungs can't break it down, and it's nasty and it makes us sick. We've seen issues even in places like Chicago, like forest fires aside, with buildings where the outdoor air intake is near to a highway or near a train track where a diesel engine might stall and that kind of thing. And so that is probably the most serious out of the metrics here. And then of course, temperature and relative humidity in terms of comfort, carbon monoxide. We track it, but it's more of an alarm versus something that we trend and monitor for trends and anomalies. And then adding some additional context and action, and data on top of that, tracking energy and comparing that to air quality. As I said, a low energy building is not the be all and end all, but we need to provide context. Yes, the air quality was good. Again, I'm in a 1 million square foot building here in downtown Chicago right now, and it's probably 15% occupied. So how the chief engineer has a balancing act between providing a healthy and thermal comfortable environment for me and my colleagues that are in the office today, but also maintain energy goals and carbon reduction goals. So air quality was good, but you spent a lot of energy getting there, or vice versa. Your energy was good, but your air quality was horrible. So being able to make that, apply that type of context to the data sets. And then people counting in terms of, yes, your air quality was good. Yes, your energy goals were on track, but hey, there was nobody in the building to meet them. So, being able to apply that context. And tracking occupancy in the context of this app is more counting people for, how many people are in the building on the floor, as opposed to activity tracking. That's a kind of a different endeavor. So in terms of gathering the data, so again, kind of focusing in on the indoor air quality aspect here, and why we created Sonrai. It was, I think we found we created it originally for ourselves because we had so many issues. Each of these manufacturers that you see here have their own kind of walled garden of data silos, and you buy sensor A and it doesn't talk to sensor B or C or D. So it was very hard / impossible to mix and match sensor type sensor vendors. So it was all great if you found a vendor that you liked and you wanted to sole source that and be in a proprietary situation. But with this market moving so fast and with so much venture capital and investment in prop tech right now, it's genuinely a difficult deal to pick a winning horse here. We have our favorites. I'm not going to endorse any one of them right now, but we like the ones that are easy to connect, are reliable connection, can automate. We can connect to the building automation system and ultimately create action from the data. And probably an important differentiator for the one we like best is ease of calibration. So you see the one at the top there. You can swap in and out those cartridges pretty simply, and as opposed to taking it off the wall and mailing it back to the factory. So if you do 30 seconds of research, you'll figure out which one we like best. And then on this image on the right here, it's a good example of, most of what I'm going to be talking about here is retrofitting into existing building applications, but this was a project that had started post March 2020 and was able to pivot and incorporate these sensors into the design, and actually went above and beyond air quality, actually did add activity tracking, occupancy sensors, and acoustic sensors as well, which was kind of cool. So, and then in terms of mixing and matching sensor types, where we're looking at I'll probably focus a lot of conversation on a traditional workplace landlord tenant kind of arrangement, and core and shell versus commercial interiors. And if we want to, a landlord is really only responsible for the core and shell system serving the building and can't really control too much what's going on within the tenant space. So this here is a good example of an in-duct air quality monitor. And again, that was a challenge that we found that we can't, that we needed to overcome, that ultimately led to us creating this platform. Was how do we take the data from an in-duct monitor and an on-the-wall monitor and an occupancy monitor, or whatever else we want to add, and bring it to a common database and a common visualization that can be used. So by default, our platform needed to be very integration friendly in terms of the different IoT sensors that we were integrating to. Again, as I said, the different types and vendors of air quality monitors, occupancy sensors. Ultimately for us, being able to integrate that data and create action, move a valve, adjust the damper, etc., with building automation systems, and have that data be very easy to integrate to other cloud integrations, whether it's Resets Cloud for a sustainability certification, or with an existing tenant engagement app or an energy platform, etc. So being able to share the data in a high integrity fashion was very important to us as well. And again, promise this is not a sales slide, but this is from our website, so it looks salesy, but again, the kind of differentiators for our platform. And again, just for context, I'm trying to describe this as there's a million good ideas out there, and at design firms, I'm a big believer in co-opetition and rising tide lifts all boats, etc. I think as a design community, we need to kind of band together and get these ideas. And I think there's a lot of interesting things going on at the large firm roundtable. We have our CEO, Griff Davenport, is the chair of the LFRT at the moment. And there are some really cool, positive momentum going on there where, sure, we compete on projects as a design firm versus design firm, but I think there's bigger existential threats to our industry that we're banding together and pooling resources on creating, technology. So this could be, I'm talking about air quality and energy, but it could be an idea about materials or you name it. So, so that's the context I'm trying to explain this in. It's just, hopefully spur some other thoughts and encourage others to do the same. But our differentiators here, obviously hardware flexibility, went over that, using different types and manufacturers of sensors and being able to be flexible and, move away from one and move to another when they get all the funding and they have the coolest widget in town now. And previously it was this other one 3 months ago. So that happens all the time. It's a really fast moving industry. Data scalability, I'd mentioned before about Project Haystack and our semantic tagging efforts. Again, if there's a secret sauce behind this, it's the analytics platform and our ability to organize and contextualize data and set it up in a way that it's an open source data framework, so you can send, everyone wants to be the single pane of glass, including ourselves here for what I'm talking about, but it's easy to snap off that single pane of glass and apply it to another one, or take our data stream and feed it into another single pane of glass because of how we've organized this data structure. So that's the data framework is extremely important here too. And then the actionable intelligence, again, having the analytics behind it and being able to use rule-based algorithms to identify, essentially what are we doing? We're just, data analytics is not exclusive to our industry, and whether it's in insurance or stock trading, whatever it is, we're just essentially looking at patterns and trends and anomalies. We just happen to be looking for trends and anomalies in air quality and energy. So being able to harvest that data and apply automated analytics to it to, develop actionable insights for facilities teams or portfolio managers to act on. And then, us being a reset accredited data provider is also a nice piece of third-party kind of assurance of that what we're doing is we're doing it in the right direction. So in terms of visualizing the data, we made a very kind of conscious decision to differentiate what the tenant or the end user sees versus what the facility manager sees. So starting with the tenant, this is probably a typical typical kind of use case for what we call our kiosk mode. And this is just, our clients use this in their lobbies and their foyers and entryways to their tenant spaces. And this is just for, again, foster a culture of trust and transparency in the data and comfort that, I think, again, if we're being realistic about it, the big driver for our business since March 2020 is landlords' desire to have a building that's more than 15% occupied, like the one I'm sitting in today. And so anything that they can do, and really the market has revolved around, the Class A commercial office spaces, the buildings that know they have good air quality and want to communicate that fact. And so that's a pretty kind of common use case here. And this is another common use case, in the lobby or at the security check-in. As you're checking in to security, you can see right there air quality. If you want to stay around for 30 seconds, you can kind of dig into the data. Here's what the dashboard looks like. So we've got a general air quality index, compare indoor to outdoor. in most of the buildings that we're integrated to, probably plus 90% of the time, the air quality is healthy because they're good buildings and they're good facility management staff and they're keeping an eye on it and they're proactive. They don't ever have that green circle turn into an orange circle or a red circle. That's not a good look for the lobby of a Class A building. But if you wanted to stand and look at it for a couple extra seconds and see, what makes up that air quality index, well, it's those same metrics that we just went over: the particulate matter, the PM 2.5, carbon dioxide, TVOCs. And again, we made a concerted effort to align our platform with the Reset Air Standard. If you're not familiar with the Reset Air Standard, check it out, look it up. It's the most stringent air quality standard, more stringent than WELL or LEED or Fitwel or any other ones, and it's only focused on air quality. And so, if you're gonna benchmark to something, that's what you want to benchmark to, and that's why we picked those metrics. And that compared to outdoor air quality, and then we have clients that want to put other stuff like marketing, right? Just put what kind of certifications they got, etc. And then, also being able to, so that's the walking by the lobby or looking at security, but also giving each employee the opportunity each building occupant to access that data in the palm of their hand via their smartphone. So the providing that data, our clients, our landlords are looking at this almost as a digital amenity, so how can we, whether they're using our app directly, or they're using our data stream to integrate with their tenant engagement apps, probably 80–90% of the customers on the landlord side that we're working with right now are either engaged, have engaged with a tenant amenity, tenant engagement app, someone like an HQO, the JLL recently purchased, or VTS Rise, or probably one of the big ones, if not the biggest. CBRE have their own host, it's called. So yeah, they're either on a tenant engagement app or about to sign up for one. And that's so you can book a yoga class, order your sandwich downstairs, pick up your dry cleaning, and check the air quality and carbon emissions. Or occupancy is now a good time to go to the fitness center. What are the occupancy trends? What are the air quality trends, etc. Then in terms of the facility manager, the chief engineer, what did they want to see? So that, intentionally wanted to make that, not dumb it down is the wrong thing to say, but make it more accessible, simple, bite-sized, that data. So for the facility manager, it's a different story. They want to dig into the details a little bit more. This is actually our portfolio here, our part of it. This was part of an R&D effort a few years ago that subsequently was donated to the Harvard Department of Public Health's COG effects study. If you're familiar with Dr. Joe Allen's work, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not, you should check it out, and definitely recommend you buy his book, Healthy Buildings. It was actually released before the pandemic, but is right on point. And you've probably seen Dr. Joe Allen on CNN and different news outlets. He's a bit of a rock star right now. So, but this is, this would be the landing page of a typical, if you want to look at your portfolio, it happens to be DLR Group's portfolio. And diving a little deeper, having the more granular dashboard on air quality, thermal comfort, occupancy as well. Being able to look at more detailed charts and get more granular on the data. Look at the past week, the past month. This view happens to be past month. You can see CO2. You can very clearly see Monday through Friday, the 5 spikes there in the center. And you can see where it's driven, again, using the Reset Air Standard as a very stringent, we'd be using 600 parts per million, which is quite a tight, quite a high bar for, that's what we would call high performance air quality, anything under 600 parts per million. But, what would be acceptable per ASHRAE standards is really anything up to maybe, City of Chicago ventilating code, we can be up to 1,000 parts per million. ASHRAE 62.1 says outdoor ambient plus 700 usually gets you up to around 1,100. But clearly, ASHRAE 62.1 is the minimally acceptable code for ventilation. Clearly, we're looking at something a little better than minimally acceptable here. So the high performance range is 600 ppm and below. And quite frankly, most of our offices do pretty good, actually. I thought to be worse spikes. TVOCs, in this case, I randomly picked this chart here, so I'm not sure what that spike was there. Tends to spike, can be a misleading one. You know, everything from hand sanitizer to, you know, cologne to whatever, you know, they can spike it intermittently. So for TVOCs, we tend to look at longer term trends and look at our reporting features for that. This is a little snapshot of actually from our Chicago office right before the holidays. You know, just again, kind of showing this in the context of educating, you know, so we give this data to people who don't necessarily live and breathe this data. We're engineers, we love data, we love digging into this stuff, but people generally don't really know the difference between CO and CO2. You know, one's going to kill you, one's going to make you sit, you know, room drowsy. But you know, looking through here, if you can see on the CO2 is in the middle. So let's go to the right here. You know, so we had an all staff meeting. It was about 50 people. You can see that spike. It still stayed in high performance range with less than 600 parts per million, even with like close to 50 people in our main gathering spot in the kitchen. But if we look back to the left, there was an art show after hours that week. And at 7 p.m., the CO2 levels had spiked up to 786. So not horrible, but not high performing. And that was much less people, but we had forgotten to ask for after hours air. And the building shuts off the air HVAC at 6 p.m. So if you ever hung around the office late and you've heard those ducts kind of contract at that, and you hear the air going off, that's because your lease says 6 through 6. And that's another thing that probably is going to be, you know, turned on its head here as people do actually come back to the office and we're, you know, move from 15% occupied to, you know, back to something approaching normal, like 60, 70, 80%. People are going to be coming back on different shifts and different schedules, working parents, you know, how do they travel? How do they pick up the kids from school? So point is, after hours air as a concept needs to change. Everyone's lease is pretty dialed in right now, and you get your air from 6 through 6. Looking at the top there, the PM 2.5, again, you know, without some context on what was that big spike, is that going to kill us? And is there a fire or something going on? It was actually known as a waffle mentorship breakfast. So it was just people cooking waffles in the kitchen in an office. You know, it's fun, but you don't, you know, an office is not set up for cooking waffles. So that's why there was a spike there. And then on the bottom here, to kind of align with the art show and the people, there was also a spike in TVOCs, quite a big spike, actually, up in around 6,000 range, where we're looking at, you know, 400 being the benchmark. And that was the, you know, we brought a lot of artwork into the space. It was off-gassing from paints, etc. So just kind of, you know, as these monitors and metrics become more mainstream, I think it's important to educate on what might be a spike. You know, what's important. I think what's important, less focus on spikes and more focus on kind of the long-term measurements. And then, as I said, you know, the secret sauce really here is the ability to do automated analytics on this and to be able to preemptively prompt the facilities team that, hey, there's an issue, you should maybe check it out. Maybe we, you know, or automate that. Ultimately, we're moving, the North Star here is to move towards autonomous air quality control. And so we can't do that until we measure it, but connecting it to move an actuator that moves a valve or a damper to alleviate the situation autonomously, that's the North Star, and we can't do that without analytics. Then ultimately, you know, just like you get a weekly report for your Fitbit or your Nest thermostat or whatever, getting that weekly report so a chief engineer can sit down on a Monday morning and see, well, how did my building perform on average last week? Well, our CO2 levels were up, 60%. Well, maybe that's a bad thing. We need to open the air damper, or maybe it's a good thing because people are actually coming back to the office, you know. So being able to see that in the reports. And then being able to apply, as I said, other contexts such as energy. Yes, we did great with air quality last week, but how was our monthly spend? And so ultimately, looking at weekly reports, rolling those up into monthly reports, rolling up those up into quarterly and annual reports is very important, especially with the mandatory and voluntary reporting frameworks that we've got out there. I'll touch a little bit more on them in a minute. And then, again, this quite frankly is our sales slide that's on our website, but just wanted to show it in the context of how we present this, how we deliver this. So the air quality, energy, and people count are very modular. We can write software around it. It kind of, mass produce it, so to speak. We put in a sensor, we hook it up, and we're away to the races. There's nothing unique or different about it. Once we've, same with energy, the energy I would kind of classify into a couple of different buckets of, the most basic energy tracking is utility bill tracking. So being able to automate and, automate scraping of the monthly utility bills and reporting that into monthly use. That's the most basic, right? And that's easy to do. Diving a little bit deeper than that, again, interval meter data or sub-meter data, where you're actually physically putting a meter on the system and being able to track in real time is probably the next level down. And there, I would still call those pretty basic. I'll touch on performance is really the kind of like diving into that deep energy analytics, where we need to connect to the building automation system and the lighting control system, so really enabling more of what we would traditionally call a monitoring-based commissioning process. And people count, again, there's complicated ways to do it and easy ways to do it. The easiest way is just buying sensors and sticking them on the wall or the ceiling and counting people as they walk through the turnstiles. You can also get that information from access control systems, but that's, every building's got a different system, and that's a little more complicated. Intelligent automation is on there. It's more of a service than a software. But that's a critical, that is the North Star. If we're collecting this data for collection's sake and putting it on a dashboard for someone to log in and look at, that's not going to go anywhere. It's just like the proverbial energy audit that sits on the shelf gathering dust. We need to drive it to action. It needs to move a damper. It needs to move a valve to enable action, to use the data to, as I said, the North Star being autonomous HVAC control. And so then kind of backing up to that performance bit, this is another client of ours, a recent report here is actually McDonald's corporate headquarters here in Chicago. Let's really dive in that little bit deeper, where we are connected to the building automation system. We are connected to the lighting control system, in addition to the basic energy monitoring, the basic air quality monitoring. But that's much more of a building by building approach, and it's hard to be modular or scale. It's a tougher one to scale because every building's a snowflake, right? Every control system is different, or this is a Siemens system, but this is a Siemens system that was installed 10 years ago. So it's complicated. If there's an Achilles heel in all of this, and I'm not just talking about Sonrai, I'm talking about just as an industry and our carbon reduction goals, and it's the difficulty of connecting to the building automation systems. That's something that we're good at, but again, it's a building by building case. It's hard to take a portfolio approach to something like that. But again, the key part being how we organize and analyze, and contextualize that data to use it to drive towards energy conservation measures, and ultimately, for all these buildings, avoiding the traditional energy drift after occupancy. So how do we integrate all of this? How do we integrate analytics into the design process and ultimately drive towards a more robust post-occupancy evaluation process? So how we do it is we've kind of enhanced commissioning process, so to speak. We do a lot of work with very progressive firms across the country. I'd say the term connected commissioning was coined by Caltech. We're one of their preferred commissioning providers, so we're familiar with their process and very, very respectful. And actually, that they're kind of they were our original North Star for who's doing it best. And they really pioneered the whole concept of connecting analytics through the construction process as early as possible. So how we've kind of taken that and put a different spin on it to make it our own here. We've we've put a lot of emphasis on our, if I'm assuming, design community here, everyone's generally familiar with the commissioning process. I would say the most important document in the commissioning process has traditionally been the owner's project requirements. We've taken a little bit of different spin on that and taken what was a 40-something page document full of just boilerplate text and stuff that nobody ever reads, and pared that down to a one-page document, which I'm happy to share if anyone wants it, because again, there's no secrets here. But our OPR is what we call our owner's performance requirements. And it's very simply, it's just outlining what performance metrics do you want to hit. This is the conversations that we're having in conceptual design, schematic design, where what's important for the owner. Is it air quality? Okay, well, are we going to use the reset air standard? Again, it's important to differentiate between the reset is a certification, but more importantly, I think it's a standard. So you don't need to get the plaque on the wall to follow the standard. Anyone can follow the standard. So it's a very easy standard to follow. It's just, they're the metrics that I set. I showed you the metrics, just stay within those metrics and you've got the, you meet the standard. Go outside the metrics, you don't meet the standard. So it's based on outcomes. It's based on performance metrics. It's not based on a simulation or a prediction or a promise or a protocol or a policy, like the other, like a lead or well would be focused more on that. I started out showing a couple of projects there that are LEED Platinum projects, but that LEED Platinum plaque was hung on the wall in 2014 and probably was never updated ever since, but still a LEED Platinum building when we describe it. But how's it performed today? No idea. We don't know. So we're trying to shift that mindset and setting performance requirements and using those requirements that we set early in design as evidence-based metrics to adhere to post occupancy. We're big believers in a soft landing phase right after building occupancy. So when we're done with the traditional commissioning process and we functionally test, and essentially commissioning is taking the building for a test drive, and before you hand the keys over to the owner and you're telling the owner that, look, everything here is good, it's working, all the sequences systems are interacting as intended by the engineer and architect, and it's good to go. Then you hand the keys over to the owner, and traditionally we all walk away from the project and move on to the next one. That's just what we do in our industry. And that's when the drift occurs. And that's, we've had several, high profile Fortune 500 corporate headquarters in the last couple of years that were LEED Platinum at delivery. But we were brought in, there were other people's designs that we were brought in to engage in a monitoring based commissioning process to rein in that drift and bring it back to where it was supposed to be on handover. I'm talking maybe 2-3 years down the line. So, that's where we are, really what we're doing here is connecting analytics, when the systems start up. So we can use the analytics to inform our commissioning process. We can test 100% of the units rather than a sampling rate of 10 or 20%. We can use that analytics throughout the construction and initial, what we call the soft landing phase between, we're generally classifying that as 12 to 18 months after the first day of business. So that when it is time for the 9-month, 10-month warranty walkthrough, that we're coming in with a much more robust list of analytics driven issues versus, a static punch list or, walking around looking at things, pointing at this, pointing at that. We're like, no, we've got, we've been tracking this VAV box for 9 months now, and we're telling you that that valve is not actuating properly. And here's the data to back it up, and go fix it, contractor, while you're still mobilized and this system is still under warranty. And so that's something that's resonating really well for our clients. And I see that's where the commissioning process is moving towards. So that's how we're integrating analytics into the construction process and ultimately taking it post occupancy, and then measuring the air quality. Does it meet the reset air quality? And as opposed to spot measurements, let's install, let's work in the design and make sure that we're putting in the air quality sensors in the correct places during the design, so we're not retrofitting them. But ultimately it's the same answer. And then to kind of summarize everything, what kind of data are we taking out in the building? I've kind of gone over this just to summarize and go over it again one last time. Occupancy data, air quality data from IoT sensors, as opposed to, why are we even using IoT sensors? Why don't, that's a common question from our clients. Wait, don't we have air quality monitors in our building automation system? Well, yeah and no. I mean, you have CO2 sensors, but they're they're low quality sensors, and they're put in for a different reasons, to control the building for energy reduction, for demand control, ventilation, to reduce the amount of air that's going to the building. And it's just about tracking CO2, but it's not tracking particulate matter. It's not tracking TVOCs. And it's, that's what we classify as the, IoT sensors, the occupancy and air quality. Utility bills, as I said, that's an easy one to automate nowadays. And meter and sub-meters, again, relatively, it's a minor drop in the ocean for the cost of these meters to install during construction or post-construction. I'd say a little more complicated, a lot more complicated part, but we have to do it if we're going to continually iterate. The performance of these buildings is connecting to the building automation system, is connecting to the lighting control system. And there's lots of other data points that we could connect, but these are the basic ones that we need to, if we're going to establish a basic framework for optimizing building performance moving forward. It's taking this data, bringing it to an independent data layer, organizing it, contextualizing it, adding that, semantically tagging the metadata on top of that. So now that different data sets can talk to each other. That's what the independent data layer is. And once you've done all that, that's the boring stuff. That's just setting a foundation. Now you can do the cool stuff. Now you can integrate the analytics. You can do some analytics on like of what it shows you, and you can prompt. Now you can enable that autonomous control. You can enable that enhanced approach to operations. And then, what are the outcomes? Now you've scrubbed the data, you've organized, you've cleaned it, you've done the analytics. It's feeding into your analytics engine. What is it spitting out? So spitting out data streams that we can use for sustainability certifications, whether it's most people are most familiar with a LEED or a WELL. I keep coming back to RESET. That's one we really like because it's evidence-based, it's performance metrics-based. It's, just hear the metric, meet the metric, you got certification. Don't meet the metric, you don't get certification. So it's beautiful in its simplicity, but they don't have as big a marketing budget as the others. But I do see, they say, the WELL and LEED are kind of seeing the differentiators that RESET have, and they're adopting a more performance-based approach too. So I think moving forward, all of the certifications are going to be based on real-time data, as opposed to that, prediction and putting the plaque on the wall based on a policy that you wrote that you hope someone implements, but you don't really know if they did or not. So putting more teeth into ongoing operations. ESG reporting, again, another outcome, again, rolling those weekly reports up to monthly, up to quarterly, up to annual reports, which portfolios can use to ESG. If you're not familiar, is environmental, social, governance reporting. It's a, kind of a mandatory, becoming mandatory for publicly traded companies. If you're going to invest, people like teachers' pension funds that want to invest in a safe bet, how are they going to invest in a portfolio that's horrible energy performer and doesn't care about the environment, or are they going to invest in a good one? I would say there's still a lot of flaws in that reporting structure, because at the end of the day, it is it's a framework created by investors for investors. And if there is a criticism, you'd say that it's less about it's less about the impact of a corporation's investment on the environment, which you'd imagine it would be. How is that we're going to invest in this building? How does that impact the environment? It's actually more about how the environment impacts the investors and bottom line. So I'm going to put a building in, X area. Is there enough water in the, it's not, am I going to impact the water resources of the area? It's going to, is the area's water going to impact the operations of my building? So it's a fundamental thing. There's a lot of greenwashing going on in that area now too, but that's, I think in 2022, going to be a very hot topic and a lot more conversation there. But also, ESG aside, just general sustainability reporting, benchmarking ordinances, greenhouse gas emissions for, talk about what's nice to do, what we need to do, things like Title 24, initiatives like Local Law 97 in New York, they're really driving this from a mandatory reporting perspective. So all this data feeds into these frameworks. Occupant engagement, touching that really a little bit, whether it's a tenant engagement app or whether you're going full on out with a digital twin, digital twins, the trifecta of information points in a digital twin is accurate spatial data, accurate asset data, and then applying live data on top of that, so you can enable action. Again, using this data as part of that live data is important. So, we've kind of set that up to feed into other people's digital twins. Performance optimization, really, that's the commissioning, the monitoring-based commissioning, the continuous optimization of building performance. Preventative maintenance, again, using the analytics to enable a more proactive approach to maintenance. Our maintenance teams that we work with every day, they're very, spread very thinly, and generally they're putting out fires, they're reacting. Something happened, we've got to run, put out that fire. Or they're working down a clipboard and a checklist, doing monthly PM tests on a chiller or a boiler. So we're trying to flip that in its head, not we, but the industry is trying to flip that in its head and use analytics. There's 50 things going wrong in the building right now. There's 500 alarms. There's 1,000 sparks from our FDD platform. Tell me what are the top 5 that I need to be concerned with from an energy perspective, from an occupant comfort perspective, and how do we, ultimately as an industry, we need to shift from, we control buildings traditionally on temperature controls. Is literally the name of that side of the industry, is the temperature controls industry, right? So are we controlling a building so that it's not too hot or it's not too cold and the people are comfortable? That's one. We're controlling buildings from an energy perspective. Are we, modulating that outdoor air damper to make sure that there's only the minimum amount of air based on demand control ventilation? That's how we've always taught traditionally, right? Save energy, make sure people are comfortable. I think the big kind of the big pivot there is going to be healthy building controls. So, and that has to lead. We're going to lead with healthy. Make sure the building is healthy. Then make sure it's comfortable. Then make sure it's energy efficient, and we're meeting our carbon reduction goals. But if the building's not healthy, who cares about carbon reduction goals at the end of the day? You're not going to go to that building. You're just going to work from home. So I think landlords are very cognizant of that right now. And then ultimately, intelligent automation, as I said several times, if we're not using this data to enable action, if we're not, if the data is not moving a damper or an actuator or getting us towards that North Star of autonomous control, it's worthless. A dashboard is dashboard by itself is worthless. It's just like, as I said, like the proverbial energy audit, it's going to sit on the shelf. No one's going to log in and look at it. We need to use this data to enable action. So that's my last slide. So I'll move to questions here now in a sec. I'll actually add one more slide. That probably should have been my first slide, but I'll leave it as the last slide. Sonrai is Gaelic for data, also used interchangeably for facts. And so I think that's, in our environment as we're where we're at today, I think moving, basing things on high integrity data and facts is how we have to move forward. That's how we avoid the greenwashing and avoid everything else, And let's be honest with ourselves, we have, we won't, I don't think anyone's intentionally greenwashing our industry, but we've relied too much on these plaques on the wall that, on our design awards, we need to, how did that building perform? Here's the data. Here's how it performed. Did you win an award for it? Great. Well, here's how it's doing 6 years down the line. So I think we're going to be judged. We are, I don't think for sure are going to be judged on outcomes and, moving towards an evidence-based framework for rewarding project success. So with that, I'll see.
Yeah, some questions. So it seems like a few people are interested in the one-page OPR. We also have a question about what is the smallest size and square footage building that this could be part of? 50,000 square feet, 25,000 square feet, and can a campus such as a K through 12 school with multiple buildings be under one system, yet flexible enough to zero in on one building or space in a building?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say that, the beauty of the air quality, let's just been taking air quality specifically, leaving the energy and, everything else out of it. The one example I showed of the client who was doing that project, like a large tech company based in Sunnyvale, California, and they actually went full coverage, right? So they went full coverage in the context of Reset is one sensor every 5,000 square feet. In the context of Fitwell, it's every 15,000 square feet. So it adds up to a lot of sensors, and there's a lot of coordination, and there's a lot of, if we're powering that over Ethernet, there's a lot of Ethernet cable and switches and stuff like that. But that's the one end of the scale. The other end of the scale is, well, just put one sensor in there, just get something going, just to be able to understand. And so you know, for 500, 700 bucks, you can put one sensor in there, see how your air quality is. If, you know, if you're getting interesting readings or noticing anomalies or patterns, buy another one. Buy another, you know, I think Washington, DC schools did a pretty, I liked how they approached it. They bought 10 sensors for every school building and just picked representative areas in each building to kind of, you know, kind of take a representative analysis of each building. And it's pretty quickly, you can pretty quickly get down, if you've got 50 buildings in a school district or on a college campus, it's not going to take too long to figure out, well, which are our top 5, bottom 5, and then, well, our bottom 5, let's focus on those. Do we need to upgrade the filters? Do we need to upgrade the air handling units, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd say, yeah, from as little as a couple $100 you can get started to as much as, you know, going all out on millions of bucks worth of sensors and technology.
Okay. The next one, what is the approximate premium to implement Sonrai above the current Class A technologically integrated office building with current BMS technology? The cost per square foot, the base cost. Thank you.
Yeah, again, just to clarify, again, I touched on it briefly, but at this point in time, there really is no, I mean, I'm talking, you know, the big BMS vendors like the Honeywells, the Johnsons, the Siemens, you know, et cetera. They don't have this level of detail in their sensors. So, you know, you're probably going to get a decent CO2 reading, but you're not going to track PM 2.5. You're not going to track TVOCs or ozone or any other metric. So that's a different classification of monitor. And so I'd say the cost premium is how many monitors do you want to, how much space do you want to monitor? Again, if you're looking at it in the context of a landlord and a core and shell space, that could be as little as, you know, if you, I mean, an easy building to do is a high-rise building with one big built-up air handling unit, and you get one of those, or you know, one in the outdoor air and one in the supply air, induct sensors. And so that's maybe, you know, $2,000 per sensor. So maybe a total of $4,000 to monitor the air being delivered to the spaces. But yeah, it kind of depends how many, you know, there's no, you know, how long is a piece of string, how many monitors do you want to put in? The interior monitors generally run at about, you know, the ones that we like that I showed are about, you know, $700-800 a pop. They're all generally in that kind of time or in that kind of price range. So how many times? Let's take 5,000 as the most extreme, 15, 20,000 is kind of a lower bar, 20,000 square feet times $750 is your cost premium.
So Todd said, thank you for answering the cost question. How about incorporating other items in the Sonrai app, such as security, weather, transit data, etc.? So there's one landing spot application for a tenant in a building to access all components, amenities of the building.
Yeah, no, that's a superb point. I guess that's maybe a restriction of us being in a design firm. I guess our focus has been on doing one part of this equation really well. And, you know, there's a lot of venture-backed prop tech firms that are doing the whole, you know, the whole single pane of glass that are, you know, when you know, the full digital twin, the full high fidelity spatial analytics, asset analytics, live data, you know, someone like you know, you see Willow or Iconics, or, you know, these guys are pushing the boundary at that end of the scale. That's just not realistic for a design firm. So, you know, we're not going to get $50 million worth of venture capital. Maybe we will, but, you know, that's not what we're aiming for right now. So our mission is to use our high integrity data feed to feed in as one of the live data streams into a bigger single pane of glass. But yeah, to your point, everything from bus schedules to train timetables to, you know, the sky's the limit for the live data that we can feed in to these single pane of glass. I guess right now our focus for this specific application is building performance metrics, which would be, you know, is the building comfortable? Is it healthy? And is it, you know, is it energy efficient? And how does that impact our carbon emissions?
And then the last question before we have to finish is, who do we contact for a demo?
You can give me a shout. Again, wasn't intended this to be a sales pitch, but definitely if you want to have a look or have a demo, I've kind of stalled on this slide here as well that has a QR code. So kind of grab your phone and hit your QR code, and that'll take you to a link where you can request a demo. And that would be the best way to do it. and our customer success manager will get that, and she'll ping me tomorrow probably. So yeah, just scan the QR code and hit request demo.
Okay. A big thank you to you, Rory, for this excellent presentation. If you've made it this far, AIA California staff will submit you for AIA CE credit. It should appear in your transcript in a few weeks. As always, more resources and tools can be found on the AIA California's website. More details about our upcoming webinar, Understanding Carbon Analysis for Existing Building Renovation, and how to register will be made available to you shortly in your follow-up email. Thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you at our next Climate Action webinar.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Great job, Rumi. Frank.